right, here we go. We're going to start our podcast.
Yeah.
Mary, give us our introduction.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow, okay. Hey, guys. Welcome back to SURGECast. Oh, yeah. Woo!
That's our catchphrase. Woo.
I'm Mary. With me, we have...
I'm Ben Lash. I help out with Surge, and I edit the SurgeCast.
I am Atticus Jorgis, and I'm a part of Surge.
I'm Luke Peterson, and I'm also a part of Surge.
And I'm Kelsey Meredith Ross, which is just Surge in and of itself. And I am going to introduce our very special guest, who is almost as much of an expert as they come on our topic today, and one of my very best friends. This is Carrie Leanne Harmon, who is joining us today.
Woo!
Say hi.
Hello.
All right, so our topic today, we are answering a special question. The question is, what do I do when I stop believing what I've been told to believe? Which has a lot to do with this term called deconstruction. So I think we're just going to ask Carrie, if you can, in your words, describe to us what the term or the phrase deconstruction means before we really get into it.
Okay. All right. Before I even do that, you called me an expert or something. I'm not even sure what you said now. Did you call me an expert on this?
I did. You are. You're an expert on deconstruction.
I would not say expert. I would say right in the middle of it, right?
Which makes you an expert.
Okay. All right. Whatever you want to call it. So it is just kind of thinking about the things that I had been taught, like in my childhood and in my past, and kind of looking at it with a new lens. So kind of like as I've grown up and as I've grown as a person, it's now just kind of re-looking at things that I once believed as a child, I guess. Is that pretty clear?
Yes, that's very clear.
Crystal.
Thank you.
Okay, good.
So why don't we just kind of go around and talk a little bit about what we've learned about deconstruction so far. So if you're someone who's listening on the podcast right now, our senior high and our junior high are both reading some books in our Wednesday night book study that have to do a little bit with this topic of deconstruction. So senior high is reading a book called Bad Theology Kills by Kevin Garcia, and junior high is reading, great book. And junior high is reading a book called You Can Talk to God Like That, and I can't spout the author's name off the top of my head, but Ben will put it in the description of the video for sure. But both of those
really
books...
worried that you're going to be like, but Ben will spell it right now.
No, we will not spell it right now. No. But we have talked a little bit in both of those groups about deconstruction. So does anybody want to just share what you may have learned or what we've talked about a little bit?
I can just kind of share. I myself feel like I'm going through a bit of a deconstruction right now, and kind of what I've learned about that is like Carrie said, just like going through everything that you've learned throughout your childhood, or it can just be like even, it doesn't have to be like things from your childhood, it can be like, I don't know, but just anything someone's told you or anything that you believed, going through that and really just wondering like, why do I believe this? What does this mean? And going through all those questions like that.
Well, me, frankly, I started hearing this word mostly when I did start getting involved with Surge this past year. But I'm one of the many people who you probably hear about who grew up in a pretty conservative household. Not insanely conservative, but pretty confidently and outspokenly conservative. But I grew up in a very liberal area. I grew up in Southern California. And so there was definitely a tipping point in my life where I grew up hearing all these things from my family, from my household, and everywhere that were very much in one direction. And then I started going to school where most of what I was hearing was going off in the entire different direction. And definitely around middle school, that was a time when I was suddenly realizing there was a lot of things clashing and a lot of things that I had to kind of re-observe and kind of decide for myself in a way. And it's scary and frustrating sometimes, but I'm glad I went through it.
I can relate to Ben in that aspect. When I went away to college, which was in Bloomington, to Illinois State, I kind of had the same experiences as far as kind of coming from a more conservative household and then kind of out from, out from my parents' household and learning new things and meeting new people. So I definitely had a similar experience to you when I went away to school.
I don't think I've necessarily grown up in a conservative household, but I have had grandparents who have been super conservative, and over the past couple of years, just me like deciphering what I believe in and, what my parents are telling me and what their parents are telling me, just kind of in both of them being like trusted people who I love and adore, just, trying to decipher of like which one I resonate with the most and which one I believe is right, and which one to like live by, and trying to hold I don't know how to say this, like morals, I guess, just like morally how to go about what I believe in. So yeah, I haven't really gone through a lot of deconstruction as many people, but I feel like I'm kind of building myself up right now.
I don't really know. I haven't gone to a lot of Bible studies. I don't really know what this is about.
Okay. All right. Well, welcome, Luke. Welcome.
I don't know what
You learned
that's about.
something today. I think a good point to make, we've talked about this a little bit in our Bible study, is that I think everybody on some level has been through something like deconstruction, but we don't always call it that. Like this kind of vocabulary term, deconstruction, is, I know Carrie and I have talked about this, it's almost like a trendy millennial term, and it's just putting a name to something that a lot of us have experienced, but we just don't realize that that's what it's called. So just have an open mind a little bit about that and know that you may have experienced it even if it's not, you haven't called it deconstruction.
Yes, and just kind of going off of that, yes, that term, you don't often hear it from other people. Like, for example, the church that I'm currently attending is very open-minded and, with good theology, but that term really isn't thrown around, which is what Kelsey just said, that her and I had talked about that before. So it can mean exactly what Kelsey said. It can mean just kind of like opening your mind to other ideas. If you would agree with that, Kelsey.
Yes, for sure. Which is, it's nice just to know that if you're someone who's listening to the podcast, just keep an open mind with that.
Right.
All right, and we get into kind of our sub-question. Tell us about your deconstruction. And this might also answer the other question of what is the first belief you begin to deconstruct, but just overall, tell us about your deconstruction.
Okay, so I cannot name one point, like a date where I'm like, oh, this is the day I began deconstructing. Like, I can't do that. As far as like a time period, I can think back to even like in middle school and high school. So this is going to kind of intertwine with one of the first things that I feel like I began deconstructing, which was like the interpretation of the Bible. And just kind of like, I'll kind of tell a story. So I have two aunts who are married, and they, growing up, I read the Bible, and, the Bible said that you're not supposed to be a homosexual. And so I'm like, okay, all right, that's pretty straightforward, right? And I remember looking at both of my aunts and thinking to myself, like, oh my gosh, they are such good examples of good people. Like, they would just do good things, and they loved us. They loved all of me and my siblings, and they were just so loving. And so I was just so confused as to how these people were not going to be going to heaven, right? Because that's what the Bible said. And so I think looking back now, I can kind of point out several times in my life when maybe I was deconstructing and I had no idea that it was happening. So I think to answer your question, probably the interpretation of the Bible is where I first started deconstructing, and specifically like verses about homosexuality. And maybe those are just some of my earliest memories, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense.
Yeah.
And I think it's enough to say that, like, I think that's a point of contention for a lot of people. Like, I think a lot of people confront their own deconstruction story with like what we would call the clobber verses, which are the verses that Carrie's talking about. There's 6 of them in the Bible, which people will often interpret as meaning you can't be gay, exactly what Carrie was talking about. And when you really do some like deep spiritual work with that, and you do some research, you read some books, you talk to people, you realize that a lot of people have like kind of misinterpreted those verses, or at least that's what I believe. That's what my deconstruction led to. And so I think that's where a lot of people kind of end up, later in life or in their teenage years or whatever, they start that story of deconstruction with that. At least that's what you hear a lot about. When you start like listening to podcasts and reading books about this, that tends to be something people bring up a lot.
Mine was kind of surrounding kind of like political discussion in middle school and stuff like that. That's how it kind of started, because like I said, there were things that my family talked about at home, and there were very passionate debates and arguments and things happening at school. And I would repeat what I would be told at home a lot at school and things, and that was just my understanding of what things were. It was my family saying these things. It was the people who I trusted the most who were saying these things, and eventually it got to a point where like I wasn't really defending it as something that I was believing anymore. It was just I was almost defending my family in a way, like this is what my parents say, this is what people I care about say. And like eventually it was just one of my friends saying like, well, like then what do you really think though in your head though? And I said, well, I guess I don't really feel that way personally. And they're like, well then why say it then? I'm like, I don't know. And so it kind of, that sounds kind of like so passive and like surrendering, like, but it was kind of a moment of weight being lifted off me, where I was really kind of connecting with my decisions and my interpretations of things that I was kind of developing as my own person, as I was developing as a person, and just kind of trusting my gut and my heart a bit more versus what my family said. And I still respect and love my family, but just suddenly I was a bit more individual then, I guess, which was special for me.
I could definitely agree with relate to that.
I feel like that is what happened to me with my aunts. I just like in my heart, I was like, I just can't believe that anymore. Like that's not what my heart is telling me. So I definitely felt that way as well. Let's see here. I was probably in, I don't know, college maybe, probably college. And I remember my mom telling me, we were talking about the church that my aunts go to. And she was telling me that in her opinion, she was like, yeah, they don't really follow the Bible. I remember her telling me that like they don't really read the Bible, and they don't really, she was like, I'm not sure they believe in the Bible. And I was like, oh, okay. So like in my mind, I like Ben mentioned, like these are the people that I trust the most, right? So I was just like, oh, they don't believe in the Bible. Like that must be a thing. Some churches just must not believe in the Bible. But come to find out, and I don't blame my mom and dad. I think I kind of go by the saying like know better, do better, and I think that is what they were taught, and yet they still have the same chance to deconstruct as I do, if that makes sense. So I don't blame them in any means, but now I can look back and see that, oh yeah, like the Bible was written over 2,000 years ago. It's been interpreted so many different times, like all of the things now that I know about the Bible, and now it makes sense. But from her point of view, she was just saying that, you know what, they don't believe in the Bible. And I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, for me personally, like Thanksgiving, it's always that time of year where you gotta have those arguments with your family. And it wasn't me who was having most of the argument, it was my sister. But she was arguing with my dad, who has some different beliefs about like homosexuality and stuff, and how he thinks it's a sin, and how like people are they're just like abandoning the Bible nowadays. And we were kind of like just saying like, well, like people aren't abandoning the Bible, we're just like deconstructing it, or we are actually talking about it and what it means more. And I don't know, I just think a lot of people are very uncomfortable with the fact that like the Bible doesn't always mean like it's very contradicting, and it can like it can say two different things, and it just sometimes it's just not right, or it's because it's translated poorly. And that was a thought that really just stuck out to me, because like homosexuality and stuff, a lot of people get it wrong, like, and it's very harmful and hurtful to people. And that's where like deconstruction is like really good for that, because it's like you can really just look into it yourself and really believe what you want to believe, and you can even tell other people, you can share that. But like
I really like the church that I'm going to, the pastor's really good about like being upfront and saying like, hey, I don't have all the answers. Like I'm exploring and discovering, and like I'm not going to be upset if you come to me with a question and you're also questioning. And so that's a really good, it's a really good place for me to be, obviously, right now, to have a pastor who's willing to listen to my questions and let me kind of wonder and explore ideas and kind of really figure out what I believe.
I just also think that once you like start a story, like a journey of deconstruction, like at this point in my life, after deconstructing a lot, I have engaged more with the Bible than I ever did before. And I feel like I know and have such a like deeper understanding of scripture than I ever used to. So I think it can be quite a misconception to think that somebody who deconstructs certain beliefs just isn't believing in the Bible or following like biblical word. Like in reality, I think you're doing a lot more with the Bible and with scripture than you used to in the past, when you just kind of blindly, believed what somebody told you for the sake of believing it.
Yeah, or blindly like memorized.
Yeah.
Just like memorized verses just for the sake of memorizing.
Yeah. Okay, so our third question is, have you ever lost people in your life due to deconstruction? And then on the opposite end, what have you gained in your life from deconstruction?
Okay, so for sure, have lost some people, and it's still people that I still interact with today, but like on a certain level, I've lost them. If you know what I'm saying, like we no longer connect on a level that we used to connect on, and so that for me feels lonely, and it's. I'm okay. I'm kind of okay with it because I can point that out and I know that's what it is. But on the flip side, what I've gained is like freedom, right? Like I now understand that like my if you believe in hell or whatever your belief of hell is, I now know that like my Aunt Jackie and my Auntie Lane aren't going to hell because they're gay. Like that to me is like, it's freedom. It feels like freedom to me to know that just because someone, in my opinion, somebody is born a certain way, they're not going to hell for that reason. So that is probably what I have gained from deconstruction. And then, as far as lost, it would be just that those people that I'm just not able to connect with anymore. And that's definitely a loss and does bring feelings of loneliness there.
Yeah, like for me, it wasn't like a dramatic moment all at once that someone's just like, we're not talking to you anymore necessarily. It was kind of like a realization and then throughout the months or however long, just, that kind of thread that you have with that person or part of it just kind of fades away. But you still feel it. And it does really hurt, to remember something that was there that's like not there anymore with this person, with a friendship or something. But like I said before, and like you were saying, it, in terms of freedom, like it gives you a better sense of who you are to yourself. You know more about who you are. You feel more confident, potentially more confident with your decisions and your beliefs and your takes on things, because you feel like you're forging your identity more and what you believe in, and trusting your heart more too. And also allowing yourself to explore more too. That's also a big part of like the freedom, and I think is really awesome.
Yeah, I was saying to Kelsey the other day that I feel like I spend too much time in my head, right? Where I want to spend more time following my heart. But that just made me think of what you just said.
Yeah. And so one of the reasons actually why I asked Carrie to be our guest today is because Carrie and I don't know if you feel this way, Carrie, but I feel like we kind of sort of started confronting the deconstruction at the same time. And so I was like really infinitely blessed as somebody who could go through it with my best friend. But I know that even though we were going through it in large part together, I know that I also had moments and still have moments of feeling like deeply lonely and just really isolated because of what I was going through, even though I have somebody to like talk to about it and really, kind of search myself for it. And something that's really similar with Carrie and I is kind of the place where we started from. We both grew up in a beautiful church, a great, wonderful church, and we have just incredible, timeless memories there. But there became a time when the gap between what we believed and what they were preaching got so big that we had to confront, like, do we stay here or do we leave? Like, we're not really being fed here. It's maybe time for us to go. And we made that decision at 2 different points. But it was a place that we shared together. And I think that was the biggest thing. Like when I think about loss in a deconstruction story, I think about this church that I used to feel so at home in, and this church that brought me so many memories and incredible relationships, and just like some of the most wonderful times of my life came there. But then there also came a time when I had to walk away from it because it was just no longer like a healthy place for me spiritually, because there were so many gaps between what I believed and what they preached. But then, it was super scary and it was really, really hard. In fact, I would almost say that's one of the hardest things I've ever done is walk away from that church. But it also like culminated in one of like the best things that could have possibly happened to me. And I think in large part to Carrie as well, like we both found 2 separate, beautiful churches that give us everything that we need. And we feel so fulfilled spiritually and so at home here. And we have such a family here. I mean, I do at this church, and I know Carrie feels a lot of that with her church as well. And so I think that sometimes you have to like face this kind of infinite, deep loss that's really big and daunting and scary. But you just have to know that like the sun will still rise the next day, right? Like Jesus still woke up and he wasn't in the tomb, and you don't have to stay in that tomb forever either. You can search like this beautiful new life for yourself once you've deconstructed all of those things that were like kind of weighing you down.
I can relate to that a lot because I'm not going to name drop the church, but I was at a church before this one, and they definitely had different viewpoints than me and my family. And the amount of like, not friends that I lost, but just friends that I'm not in contact with a lot now is because of those viewpoints and because I left. They kind of, actually still today, they kind of still ask me why I still left, and I tell them, and they're like, that's not a valid reason. Like, this is a good church. Like, you should stay at this church. You should come back. And I'm like, no, I found a family at this other church. I'm going to stay here. You can come if you want to, blah, blah, blah. But there's one particular friend that I lost due to deconstruction like a couple years ago. It was actually like during a relationship where I was expressing my viewpoints about the LGBTQ community, and the other person just didn't like reciprocate those feelings, and it just became super, super awkward after that. And every time I like advocated for them, they would just like shoot down my beliefs and, really changed as a person, like how they acted towards me because I said my beliefs. So when things finally ended and I asked why they ended, they said it was because of differing viewpoints. And I kind of was really hurt and relieved because it just felt like a weight was lifted off my shoulder because I didn't have to have constant battles with this person that I thought I loved. So it was just very revealing, I guess. I don't know.
There's also something to be said about the fact that like something can be a good church and not be the church for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then,
That's just not a good church.
Was someone just about to talk?
No, you can
keep going.
Yeah, I was gonna say yes. Leaving the church where I was, right? Like I identify with the 6 on the Enneagram, so I am so loyal, and sometimes that loyalty is like you got to give it up at some point, and right, like I got to that point where I was like, I could see that like that wasn't the place where I was going to be able to grow in the ways personally that I know that I needed to. And so at that point, I was like, this is my time to go. I need to move on to something else. And so it was super, super hard to leave because, like I said, that loyalty piece of me is just like, I had been going there since I could remember. So that was super hard leaving. And yes, it's super awesome to have Kelsey by my side, or us together in this journey, however you want to put it. But at times, yes, I still feel that loneliness. And Atticus, I think this is what you just said. You were, talking about losing some people, and in some ways losing someone who has a different viewpoint. In some ways it kind of sets you free, but in other aspects, you still kind of feel lonely. And I think that I definitely felt both of those feelings.
And then that kind of leads us to our last question. How do you reconstruct after deconstruction?
Oh, so you find your friends, right? Kelsey, we text often, whatever. She sends me something, I send her something. You got to find your support system, and you have to find, you just have to find your support system. And whether that be people who are your age, or people who are around your age, or people who are, mentors to you. So for sure, find those people in your life because they are there. And also, I recently started going to therapy. And actually one of my, if you want to call her a mentor, recommended this therapist. And I have worked out a lot of things in therapy that I didn't even know was a problem for myself. And then probably podcasts. Like I listen to a lot of different podcasts. And that helps me with, specific ones on like deconstruction. So those are 3 different ways that I am currently reconstructing. And I feel like that can be a very long process or journey, however you want to phrase it.
So, like, have you guys ever seen Harry Potter?
Yeah.
Actually, no.
So there's like a scene, they have this thing called the Phoenix in Harry Potter, right? And there's this scene, if you're like the movie people and not the book people, there's a scene when Harry's in Dumbledore's office and he sees this bird that's like beautiful, like it's gorgeous, and it's like really big and majestic, and it just like kind of bursts into flames. And Harry's like standing there and he kind of freaks out and he's like, oh my gosh, what's going on? And then out of like the ashes of this bird that has just like spontaneously combusted comes this like adorable little new bird, right? And so I think often of deconstruction a lot like that Phoenix. Like it gets really dreadful and really pretty ugly when you're going through it, and you can feel just like totally, I don't know, just isolated and lonely and angry. There's so much anger, I think, that comes with deconstruction, and shame. But then out of the ashes of all that you've deconstructed come this like beautiful new life. And it's small at first, and it can't do a whole lot because you have to figure out how to like live in those new shoes, right? You have to figure out how to like pave your new way. But eventually this, like, you have the freedom that Carrie was talking about to like be a new person and to be the person that you feel like you were always meant to be, and the person that feels good and right in your heart.
And that's part of what makes it so scary, depending on when you go through, like, if you go through a really kind of pivotal deconstruction in your younger years, in your adolescent years or your high school years, you can have doubts, and you can like stave off kind of exploring those doubts more because you're afraid of losing your most central kind of support system and people who support you and your family. And it's scary to worry about, even if you're discovering something about yourself, like you're going to end up being someone who is alone. And it's important to remember that it's easier said than done, I know, but like you aren't alone. And that's part of that process is exploring the world, exploring people, finding people who you can find who can be the dependable friends and can be your support system. Saying support system kind of sounds cold, but it's not cold, it's very warm. Trust me. But yeah, I mean, it can be someone who you already know, or it can be someone you meet for the first time who can be that friend, like the friends that you two are, that can really help each other. You know, it's really hard to do alone, and it can be easy to feel like you're becoming alone. But going through this process can often end with like deeper friends than you left behind. I think almost always leaves you with deeper friends than you ever left behind.
Yes, I love that point. Because I feel like in this process, you learn more about yourself, and just knowing more about yourself, knowing who you are and who you are meant to be, helps you to develop deeper relationships with other people.
All right. Well, we just want to, I think we're kind of up on time, and we're going to go ahead and wrap up, but just one final closing thought after Carrie, what else would you like to say?
I mean, the journey, it can be long, and as we've said, long and lonely, but the freedom on the other side is so worth the journey.
Really is. And we just want anyone who is listening to know that if you are someone who's going through any sort of faith deconstruction, or if you're not, Surge is a place for you, and Wesley UMC specifically, we always have open doors for you. Whoever or however you show up to us, there's a place for you here. And we celebrate exactly where you are in your journey. We'll ask questions with you. We will sit in silence with you. We'll cry with you. Or we'll just rejoice in where you're at with you if that's what you need as well. So know that you are not alone. And even if you're someone who's like not around the Wesley UMC sphere, you're just like hopping on the podcast train, know that podcast theology is a real thing, and we can be a community online. You can engage with us as well. Like, we are happy to be here for you and make space for you.
I second that.
Heard.
Luke, do you want to chime in?
Yeah. Maybe just a little bit. Maybe just a little bit on what Kelsey said on like how the Phoenix and Harry Potter, like that. At first, I really didn't understand it, and then we got more into it, and Kelsey said that, and I just thought it cleared up what the definition of deconstruction really meant to me. So
thank you, Harry Potter.
even though I've never watched it or read.
It's all right.
Yeah. Woo!
It'll be our next book study.
Yeah.
Next Bible study, reading Harry Potter.
All right. Well, Carrie, thank you so much for being our guest tonight. Love everything you've said, everything you've shared with us.
Oh yeah.
Thanks for having me.
You and me forever, ever.